No problem. Did everyone have a nice 4th of July weekend?
It was quiet.
Yeah.
Well,
was
except
like
for the
every other
fireworks. My neighbors behind me, my poor dog, my one dog was traumatized. Oh,
Oh, yeah. Those sounds tend to negatively affect all dogs, at least all the dogs I've ever known.
Yeah, it's the time when most dogs disappear and run away.
Yeah. I have one that could care less. The other one was, he was a mess. So. And we put some great pictures of our, there was a photographer who was coming to Moab, and Robert here in the office helped give him some information. And he was here for the fireworks and took the most incredible pictures for 4th of July. The fireworks looked spectacular. They look like a big city, you know. Major city. So he sent them, and Robert posted them out there on social media, on Facebook. And so if you get a chance, check them out. They're just beautiful.
Cool.
Maybe that'll inspire a plan for next year.
Okay, well, it's 12 o'clock and we've got enough folks to get started, and I want to be really mindful of everyone's schedules. So we're going to try to keep today's meeting to 1 hour or less. And the main thrust of this meeting is to take one more big step forward in defining the pots of money that we want to request funding for through SB 95, and what I anticipate doing is, hopefully after today we'll have a good idea of what we are going to request, and then maybe between today and next week, Elaine and I can work together on drafting the actual language for our application and bring it to this body one last time for review before we put it to a vote with the county council on the 21st, and then submit it at that point. So that would be the having a goal of actually submitting our application on Wednesday, July 22nd. Okay, so before we move into that primary focus of this meeting, sorry, I didn't realize I didn't have my video on. Let's just quickly review the minutes from our last meeting. Does anyone have any changes to those minutes? Rob sent those out in response to an email from Lonnie Campbell. So hopefully you were able to see those. I don't have any changes. I mean, I like the approach that Rob is taking in terms of completeness. I think there's enough detail in there. And then of course we have the recordings. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes as drafted?
I'll be happy to give you a motion to approve.
Okay, Brad has provided a motion to approve the minutes. Leanna Etchberger has provided a second. Any discussion?
I just want to thank Rob. I think the minutes are much better.
Great. Okay, without any additional discussion, I'll call for a vote. And Curtis, you can vote. You are a voting member, even though you weren't here. Okay, so that's a yay from Leanna, Elaine, Kelly, Brad, John, and Rob, and I will also be a yay. Jasmine, Curtis Wells is also a yay.
Yeah, I'm a yay.
Okay, so that is unanimous, Rob. And so let's just not waste any more time and get right into the application. I will share my screen. Of course, this is also a shared Google Doc. Is everyone seeing this?
Yeah, I have a
Okay,
question. Emily shared a website, and I'm curious to know, because we had some conversations about, helping with rent for small businesses, et cetera, with Lonnie's email. And I'm wondering what is actually available, right? So, I mean, I think that we should look at what other resources are available and try to find where the gaps are and use this money to fill in gaps.
Okay. So, to my knowledge, what is currently available is the remainder of the money that hasn't been distributed through the PPP. So that is a small amount of money. The last time when it was extended, I think there was $130 million left. So businesses would need to apply to that through the SBA, or not through the SBA, but
The local bank.
through their banks. Sorry. And the EIDL, I'm not sure if businesses can still apply for that. That application was directly through the SBA. So that's what I'm aware of at a federal level. Kelly may be able to fill us in on any indications that she's heard on extensions of the expanded unemployment insurance, but she may or may not have updates on that.
My only update is that it sounds to me like it's in Congress right now, and they're debating what to do in terms of extensions and what amounts that they would grant. So I think that's up in the air. I think it's pretty safe to say that there'll be some extensions of unemployment, but I don't know what the details would look like.
Okay.
And it's always possible that they'll tank that, but I don't think so. I think there'll be unemployment extensions, further extensions, but I don't know what it'll wash out to look like at this point.
Okay. At the state level, there are a handful of pots of money available. The one that comes to mind right off the top is what Emily in our office and others have shared recently, which is a pot of money that GoEd is providing to small businesses to support their rental payments. So if they can show, I think it's between a 35 and 45% decrease in revenue during any 4-week period since March, then they can receive 50% of their rent payment from the state for 2 months. If they can show more than a 45, or maybe it's a 55% decrease in revenue during that 4-week period, then they can receive up to 100% of their rent for 2 months. There's some money available for arts and cultural entities. And then there's a couple other pots that I can't recall immediately. I'd have to pull up the list. So, I mean, the money that's available is certainly dwindling, and I think that, I said this last week, but I think that, we're approaching the point where like the relief programs are definitely not going to suffice.
So we need to make sure that how we organize these three pots, that we're going to try to get businesses to do more business and generate revenue,
Correct.
and therefore sustain the workplace by creating jobs.
Yep. So for those, let's just go through this table at a high level then. So for those that weren't on the call last week, or just to jog everyone's memory, we moved from this initial breakdown of funding, and you can see this in the initial RCG draft tab, to this funding mix. So assuming there's $100,000 available, the group voted to move forward with the three pots shown here: $4,000 for administration, specifically money to support an AmeriCorps Vista, the goal there being to increase the staffing capacity, essentially, or the administrative capacity. And that's already in motion. Elaine has been connected with the Free Health Clinic, which is the Vista coordinator for our area, and we're just waiting to hear back from the AmeriCorps program on the number of positions approved for this area, but it looks promising. $70,000 for business retention and expansion and entrepreneurship, and then $26,000 for education. I would say that for the purposes of this chart, the money in this BRE and entrepreneurship pot is money for both entrepreneurs and existing businesses. So, you'll see several subcategories here, and what we need to do today is really break down this 70,000 and 26,000. That doesn't mean that, whatever we apply for through the state can't be changed, but we want to have a good idea of what we're trying to accomplish.
So Zachariah, what do you think the best way to do that is?
Well, I'm open to suggestions, but what we might want to do is sort of rank these subcategories and any new subcategories, and start with a prioritization and then attach dollar values, or just go straight to the dollar values, knowing that those are in effect prioritizations. I'm willing to open that up to the group and entertain suggestions or comments, recommendations for specific programs and how much money that would cost. I can kind of provide some historical context for numbers associated with education. Caitlin Myers, who's on the call as well, can help with that, I think. And so.
So, Zachariah, just to sort of be clear, I'd like to get a sense for what the overall goal is in terms of, to me, it seems like consensus is trying to mostly focus on the short term and helping existing businesses and potentially new businesses get moving. It's not a huge amount of money. So I think it's really, for me, it's very important to prioritize where the money goes to have the biggest bang for the buck. And I think we talked a little bit about that last time, but it would be helpful to me to have a little more understanding of where everyone is in terms of what top 2 priorities maybe are, and that would help me feel comfortable prioritizing a little bit more. And I really do think the biggest bang for the buck is important in this, it's an emergency time, and this is a small amount of money. And if we can prioritize 1 or 2 things and really make a difference, I think that makes sense, rather than spreading money out really thinly and not having it work for anything. I've seen that happen lots of times. So
I wholeheartedly agree. I think if we can narrow this down to like 1 or 2 subtopics for each of these categories, the better, because you're right, it's not that much money.
Zechariah,
Yeah,
Zechariah, what are the 1 or 2 metrics that we have access to that we can track, so that makes sense to see if we can move the needle at all? If it's some revenue number, if it's participation of companies running at 70% or 80%, whatever the couple of the key metrics that you rely on for economic activity, and maybe we can back into those so that we can show if we're having an impact.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they may be too broad and too big a metrics to be able to do that, but is there something that, numbers of jobs, so that we can track things over time? Now, we won't be responsible for all the economic recovery because we don't have enough money, but we'll participate in it. And if the metrics are moving in the right direction, we're being successful.
Well, I mean, some obvious ones off the top are employment figures and unemployment figures, wage rates, firm formation or closure across industries.
Do you have access to that information? That's
At a county level.
current, quick?
At a county level,
Yeah.
but we don't have it at a firm level. That's not provided.
At what level?
Like a specific firm level.
No, I understand
individual
that.
firm level.
And I
It's
mean,
all aggregate.
yeah, Division of Workforce Services has some of that, but there's
Correct.
reasons why they can't divulge it. But that hopefully what you're getting is an aggregate that comes out of DWS,
That's correct.
so that we can get those and track those. I think if we have a couple of those, and then we back into what's going to help drive job creation, and maybe we talk about job creation and business development in this BRE and entrepreneurship. And one of the things that always cross my mind when you start looking at sub projects is we got to make sure that people are connected to the resources that are out there. So we got to be able to catalog them and track them, and have somebody that can make sure those resources are doing what they're supposed to do, that they're getting to people that need them. And that is one of the things I like about the Grand Area, the GAIN program can be helpful in that arena, and other things that people can do to make sure that we are getting all the bang for the buck and all the relationships that the companies need. And so I think that networking is kind of a soft word that people don't like, but maybe there's another word. But making sure that we're well organized and have good information flow, I think, is critical and should be part of the BRE entrepreneurship program.
Brett, I agree with you on the gain component. I think there's a lot of benefit, but if I caught that last part with Zechariah, I think and with Kelly, is that we're really in a kind of an emergency situation. And I think for me, my opinion is that we continue to look at maybe it's recovery, relief, COVID recovery and relief, but then add a growth component to it, where again, if people are applying for it or businesses are applying for it, how many jobs are you retaining with this dollar amount? Very simple, something similar to the PPP. Are you growing or retaining jobs is the big one for me. And I think it's a scholarship, right? If we're really looking at long-term, can we take, $26,000 or $50,000 and create some scholarships for adult continuing education to expand their skills base? I think those are the two lowest hanging fruits that we have right now.
Well, I think that the skill base expansion, longer term, and as we try to recruit other people in, are going to be important. But I really think that the scholarships, if we're understanding this correctly, I would like to see it be something that really jumps into the workforce services and the training program monies that are available, so that we're not spending money on curriculum that, and to send kids or send people to educational organizations. We're actually doing job training, and job training can be subsidized. There's governmental ways to do that. Kelly knows a lot of those. And I think that we really need to focus on that, because that'll get us more money.
Absolutely.
I don't know if putting an adult in a coding class for $10,000 makes any sense. Okay. That's run by a coding school or Utah State or whatever, where I think that if there are similar things that are under job training, where there's that job training money, that they can coordinate that with the providers that they know. I think that's a great idea. And if we can add some money to that, so that instead of doing 10 out of Kelly's department, she can do 30, that's great.
No, I like that. I like that approach as well. I think, if there's some technology, like if there's a individual that was part of the natural resource world, and because of the mines closing, that they had some, technology background, and they could get some specific training in 8 weeks and get into a job, right, is kind of the goal.
Right.
Those are the perfect kind of scenarios, right?
Right.
Look at. Can that, is that a coordination between Kelly and Liana at USU as well? So.
Right. Or SBDC or whatever, right?
Right, exactly.
It's trying to determine product market fit as quickly as possible.
I think it looks very similar to what you're talking about in terms of networking for businesses, coming up with the overall package for an individual who has those particular goals. Some of our programs might fit for them. Maybe vocational rehabilitation fits for them. Maybe they need a private scholarship because they don't fit into the categories that we have. But I think it has a lot to do with that kind of coordination. And it's some stuff that Leanna and I do already, but definitely it could be enhanced.
Right.
Probably other people brought into the loop. I don't know what you think, Leanna.
If I can just add on, I think I would like to maybe just go, because I think that the education piece is clear, that we can get through that prioritizing piece first. And I'd also like to just sort of add some of the things that we do. We have, with our role as a technical college now, we have technical college tuition now. So it's much, much less expensive than it was before. So it'll be a lot easier to get folks through. A lot of these certificates are really quick. And I'd like to point out, I don't know, I can't give a time or a date, but there are some efforts in various departments to do non-credit credentials. So for example, there are a certificate coming down the pike for entrepreneurship from the Huntsman School of Business. So there's some things that are coming up that are going to be inexpensive, quick, get people in. And I think that Kelly's really right. We need to look at each individual person. I think we could use guidance from the group in terms of like where are the areas where there's the biggest need to get people in, right? So a community understanding of where the gaps are for jobs in our local community, not in the aggregate entire Southeast, but right here.
Right.
And then Kelly and I can work really hard on getting those things done. And if we have a little bit of scholarship money, we can fit those folks in and get some jobs. Because I think that I keep reading about these businesses going out of business. And so there's folks that need jobs, and we have gaps in things that need to be done here. So,
Leanna, are you confident that that scholarship money would be utilized?
Yes. Yes.
Leanna, may I add to that just a little bit?
Mhm.
I believe it's through USU, a program that our business utilized. It was like a matching grant type of thing for training. Skate Moab used that in order to get certifications for skate instructor. And I mean, things like that. It's just great that we can apply for something like that as a small business.
Yeah, that might have been like STIT money or
I think so.
yeah. So that's actually through the Small Business Development Center.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was. I wasn't sure exactly where it came from because I'm not the managing partner.
We house it at USU, but yeah.
And how much money do you think would be needed to effectively fund a scholarship?
Yeah, I don't know how much some of these certificates would be that are coming down the pike, but I know that for it, it kind of depends, especially with the current technical education. The tuition is very small, but some programs have like welding would have a lot more because of the equipment that that cost that it takes. But I think something like $1,000 a semester-ish for a student would go a long ways, basically cover them if they're really stuck. And I think that a lot of times that happens, people aren't coming to get their education because they can't put food on the table and put that time in to get it done. And so if we could help them in some way to basically pay that tuition for them so that they can take the money.
Who knows what jobs are available?
Yeah,
Or
that's a good
jobs
question.
that need to be done. Is that Kelly?
Yes, we have listings,
Yeah,
but I don't think we're hitting all of, I know we're not hitting all of the jobs that are out there. And I think employers have had frustration in the last several years because we really have, there's been a shortage of labor. And I think there are other, probably blasphemy for me to say this, but there are probably other ways that have been more effective for certain employers to recruit. So we have a sense of it, and we have some data, again, in aggregate about overall job openings that is not dependent on whether people post with us or not.
I
But
understand.
it's not especially current usually. I know what.
So let's say, we assume $2,000 for the year per student. 10 students, that's 20 grand in scholarship money. If we then say, okay, what's the return on investment there? Presumably we would be able to say, okay, that $20,000 has enabled 10 individuals to complete a certificate program, which has done what for them? Are we confident that that translates into a job that wouldn't have otherwise existed, or a job or wages that would be higher than they would have otherwise been? I mean, my concern there is like, my sense is that the jobs are there whether we fund that scholarship program or not.
Yeah, and I think we need to broaden our reach with the job placement. It's not necessarily, we are a tourist and mono economy community, right? And so some of those jobs in the secondary economies are going to be the natural resource world. But if Brad, you have some contacts at Silicon Slow that could, are in the market for, entry level technicians or remote, support, if there's any of that stuff, can we?
And I think we need to put money aside for that. I think that's
can
one of
we
the
engage them? Right.
I think that's one of the programs we need to put together so that the next Zachariah, which is Elaine, can get up to the front, the Wasatch Front Range and meet with 10 companies in 3 days and maybe come back with a demand, right? And work with Kelly to help fill that demand.
Right, and so we can also leverage on the job training money to help with the first few months of that.
Exactly.
Employment. I think the big thing is being organized about it, identifying those companies and having enough, anyone we put on an OJT has to meet the requirements of the program, which is most of the time, we almost never turn someone down. There would probably be a couple people who didn't meet that. And so maybe some of the scholarship money that we're talking about here could supplement those. Let's say we have 5 people and 3 meet our requirements and 2 don't. We've got some other way of doing it, but we need to be organized about it and identify, as Leanna said, where are the needs, where's the focus, so that we can, pull that off.
Yes, Kelly, and we need you to be able, at the best that you can, because I understand that you don't have always, instant information in real time. But you say, as you know, you have a good handle, pretty good sense of what's needed, what jobs you do have posted, what the jobs that you don't have, but that are out there. And if we have a good target that way, then you can coordinate this program. And if we have a good understanding of the labor force, we can sell what we have and talk about upgrading what we have to other employers. But, I think that there will be people that would be interested if we have a process that works to give it a try.
Yeah, I think if we start with even local businesses, if there are people who are frustrated with trying to get employees, let's find out who those people are, hook them up, train somebody and put them in it. And we can do that all locally. We don't have to go to Wasatch.
That's exactly right. And get our house in order.
Yes.
So
That's what I was thinking, the very same thing.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that businesses, 1 or 2 I've heard from, they just, have a lot of frustration with trying to find employees who will show up to work at all, just consistently. So I don't think we have probably a labor force where we could attract and bring in businesses. I think maybe some of the jobs or things where they're more entrepreneurship based, where, there's just less employees, but we could help people that are motivated to start something, a business that would,
So in defense of our workforce, I don't think, I know that there are people who really don't want to show up to work. There are also people who live here because they want to have that life balance. There are also employers, of course, none represented here, but employers that don't necessarily value their workforce or aren't able to pay what, there are families that do a lot of job hopping because they can make an extra 50 cents an hour somewhere else because that will help them pay the rent better. So I think it's more, I don't think it's a simple issue in terms of the labor shortage.
But Kelly, I don't think we're special in that regard. One of the top economists in the country who I follow has said time and time again, the biggest test employees need to pass, and they're failing, is a drug test. Okay. And that's everywhere. That's just not Moab. And so, I mean, I support you understand the dynamics of the Moab labor environment, which is being a tourist business, and the young people coming in and out is different than the Wasatch Front. Okay. But you guys have a pretty good handle on it, at least, to try to mitigate that so that we can move this forward.
Yeah, comment on that, if I may. I think what Rob referred to, I think that's a real issue. I think it's indicative of the compensation levels in those segments of the economy. The more diverse and the more businesses that we could attract or generate here that can compensate at a higher level, you don't run into those issues, and they're going to pull employees up from other sectors that they're going to be earning at a higher level. But in the amenities economy, particularly, food and beverage and retail, I mean, anytime your compensation is south of $15 to $17 an hour, you're going to struggle. There's no doubt about it.
Curtis, you're absolutely right. And tourism, for every tourist job that is created, 0.4 of another job is created. When you deal in, for example, high technology and manufacturing, for every of those jobs, every one of those jobs that are created, you create between 2 and 4 other jobs because they're much more high value added. Well, hopefully over time, we can bring more high value added jobs here, and we can take the people that we have here and train them. One of the things that employers want is they just want people that know that they need to show up and that they want to work hard and they're willing to learn. Boy, you get those 3 skills, and I don't care if they've not graduated from high school. I don't care if they can't read that well or write that well or communicate that well. But if they're willing to work hard and think, that is a big deal.
So, Rob, you've been raising your hand for a bit, and John and Caitlin, you haven't spoken yet today. Elaine, I know you've probably got more to add. I want to make sure that everyone is getting some mic time, and then also bring our attention back to the spreadsheet, just so that we have something to work with after today.
So is that all this? I wanted to, yeah, and try to see if we can make some progress on the spreadsheet. On the BRE entrepreneurship side, I have a few recommendations. I think maybe we should just take out childcare, take that off, because we don't have a ton of money. And maybe I like the idea of focusing. To me, it seems like we have 2 constituents to help out, which are existing business and people looking to start new businesses. I think people looking to start new businesses is going to be a smaller portion of opportunity people, especially given COVID. So I think we could split it out that way. I think we should devote less money to them. I think we should definitely have something, give them an opportunity to get funding and show that we support them. But new businesses, we could also put in touch with like angel investors that would have more money beyond this pool. Like a pitch contest, for instance, like you could have that without really putting any money in it. You could have the judges be sharks, tanks, people that put in 20 grand or something, they're going to invest in return for equity. I think one way to incorporate a few of these suggestions into like 1 or 2 things would be on the COVID recovery. Perhaps what we could do is a number of businesses, most businesses take money in from the community of Moab from tourism. Some sell products externally. Some have a hybrid where they have some things for sale online and things. I think we all agree that we'd want to encourage businesses to develop more external sources of revenue, given that this crisis could go on for a few years. So perhaps we could have the COVID grants be directed at helping businesses, maybe hire someone to help with their website or to extend the product line. So that could be a nice, clean way where we could just kind of like do that. And that would check a few boxes off, where it'd be creating new business opportunities for existing businesses. It'd be helping those businesses get through this, which I think is going to be which is a big way to help economic development, keeping people afloat. It's a good use of money than if they have to close up shop. So I wanted to put that to the group, and maybe if you want to consolidate that giant section 2 with different options. I don't know the best way to do it if we vote on things, but I'll put that to you, Zachariah, and let you take that where you want to.
Hey, Rob, I sorry, jumping in here. I really like that idea of kind of organizing that. It makes a lot of sense. Can we throw one more in there is tourism? And one thing that I'd like to share with everybody is that currently the tourism that we are getting right now, until things change in the future, that is essentially sustaining some businesses to save money and get through the chaos right now. There's businesses that are anywhere between 50 to 70% down for the year, but the business that they're getting right now is helping them. So is there any mechanism of and any interest within the group to be able to throw some dollars at that?
Sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Say that last comment again. What do you mean throw some dollars at what?
At the tourism component, is there a need there from Elaine's group to help continue to generate interest, to expand the
Okay.
tourism side? Is it, is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? Is there anything that could happen with that? Because right now, tourism is what's keeping the doors open for a lot of these businesses.
I think Seek, I agree with you. There's got to be something. What can we do? What can 5, 10, 15, whatever $1,000, how can it be placed in the traditional tourism economy? And maybe Elaine can help us. If it's just to be used to help get an intern, is it to use to help do a special ad campaign? Is it used to somehow encourage people to buy more so that I was just shocked when they said that the average tourist spends $300 in Moab on their trip. And that hasn't changed for like 10 years or whatever it was. I mean, it was just mind numbing. Is there something we can do? Because if you're running at 50%, but you can get an extra couple of points or 5 points, in additional revenue, you might be able to break even and keep going.
Yeah, well,
And
let me
so-
just jump in. I mean, Elaine, aren't the numbers like, I agree that helping tourism would help, but your budget last year was like several $1 million, right? So, $2 million.
We actually used about 1.8 million to do worldwide advertising. That was everything.
So how is, what's that equal? That's 1%. We're talking 18,000 would be 1%.
I'm not sure it's being suggested that it's specific on marketing, but I think it ties into the existing business. We talked about this last week. The fact of the matter is we're still in triage mode. Like we're battling for every business in Moab that is a tourist-based business. My worry is that everything that we've talked about to date is all, or in this hour, it's all fantastic and we need to do it, but we need money to keep this thing, like just to keep people having food in their mouths. And right now that's tourism. That's the low hanging fruit. Once we get that more sustainable, then we should start devoting funds to other mechanisms to diversify this economy. But I personally don't feel like we have that luxury right now.
Well, I see where you're coming from, and I agree. What I would like to see is can our money be used to generate internally within the state maybe more tourism, because that's going to happen. Where we're going to get killed is nationwide tourism and international, which has been a big deal. But boy, this COVID thing's going to go on for a while, and it's going to just kill that market.
Yeah,
and so how can we
markets?
And I know that Elaine is restricted as to what money can go where, and I think that's a big mistake. And I think if we need to go visit with the governor or go ahead and say, you got to change this, doesn't make any sense, we need to go do that. Okay, you need to, for at least this year or next year, we need to rebalance the budget of where we're going to spend our tourism dollars. And but if a little bit of money can help drive tourism to Moab, help the tourist industry, hotels, restaurants, etc., retail shops, then I think we need to do that. I don't know if we exactly know what that should be yet, but I think we should put some money towards it and try to get the biggest bang for our buck.
Well, actually, I think that supporting the drive markets is what I wanted to do, because I was on another call yesterday where, people are not going to fly. Flying
That's
is
right.
not what they want to do. And driving, and to me, if we could have a campaign, a social media campaign where we could target and like the Colorado market, the Wasatch Front market, to do a marketing campaign via social media, that would immediately get out there. We wouldn't have to worry about trying to do something else. Print, we could just immediately, go to that and get it moving. And to me, that is where we're hurting the most, is trying to while the other counties are all marketing and advertising, we're one of the counties that is absolutely doing nothing to market because we have no money.
Elaine, I think, like, what flexibility do you have to spend money? Do you guys have assets? I imagine you have some cash in the bank.
No, according to the latest budget, we're waiting to, for the auditors to determine. I had almost 700,000 that was left over from last year that was in the fund balance, but that was used up because we did a lot of shoulder season marketing. That's when we do it. So right now we have no funding. We have nothing. No funds available.
So
Where
do you
get your
think
money
that
from?
do you think you could do something substantive with $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 or?
Yeah, I think if we took to do a social media campaign, if we had about 15,000, I could go. We could target the drive markets on social media right away.
Okay, well, if you think that you can stretch a small amount of money relative to your prior year's budget and make an impact on what you're currently doing now and move the needle, I think we'd probably all be in support of that.
Yeah, we can do that. Plus, we would be able to validate that with statistics, based on.
That's right.
I mean, that's a no-brainer. That could be done.
Hey, Zachariah, are there any services at the county that like the hand washing stations and stuff that are out there in the public? Are those services going to continue? Are we budgeted for that? Would it help to retain any type of that workforce as well versus them getting furloughed and things like that? That does indirectly support the tourists that are here.
The hand washing stations, I had those put out there in 14 locations back at the end of March. So we've been, those hand washing stations cost about $900 a week for all of them. And that's probably going to be covered under the COVID, something out of COVID. I'm sure we're coding it to be COVID related. And I'm sure at the end of the day, that will be covered with something that the county, what funds the county will receive.
CARES Act.
And that is ongoing. We haven't decided that that we'll pull them. Right now, they're ongoing.
So my feeling on this is that I don't know. I mean, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what $15,000 could do in a social media campaign. I am in support of directly subsidizing our tourism economy. But I would probably take the tact that Chic has opened up, which is, helping to improve the tourism environment that's here. I think as much as people are afraid of flying, they're also afraid of staying in hotels. And the people who are coming here, they want to come camp. I mean, that's just the reality, is like people want to be outside. They want to be in their own space. They want to have a buffer. And, I think that the overnight rental market is probably better suited than hotels because people have their own contained space rather than using shared, common areas.
Are there any jobs that are indirectly that are in danger with that?
Right.
From a county or a city level, at a community level, that we could help maybe continue to, put those dollars back into the community?
That's a really good question. I don't feel like I'm prepared to answer that. I think that's probably a better question for city and county administration. I mean, clearly there have been a lot of layoffs in both organizations. or at least furloughs in both organizations, some layoffs. Elaine doesn't have any staff right now. So.
And kind of how I see this, Elaine, as well, is that, if you're able to create that continued support for the safety of not only the community and the tourists, I mean, that's a marketing component from a social media standpoint as well, that could get a lot of traction for the area.
Well, that's what we're hoping to do with the stay safe to stay open, and which was passed by the county last night. And the chair is going to sign the pledge. So, and I just sent out an email this morning for businesses to sign the pledge, because the more that we can have the local community sign on to that pledge, and the people traveling around the state, the visitors, we can say to them that all of these businesses, we can put that up on the website, have signed the pledge to stay safe, to stay open, which is the state pledge. So it's uniform. It falls into what the state's working on. So I think that is, well, we're going to have all that information up. The attorney just approved the content, and we're going to put that out there on our social media, hopefully today.
So that's where my mind went, is there any sort of add-on to the Stay Safe, Stay Open campaign? Or any, I'm not that familiar with what the Stay Safe, Stay Open, campaign involves, or what it's trying to accomplish specifically. But I'm wondering if there is like an add-on to that, and maybe that's the lens through which we advertise. If the group does in fact, think that the advertising dollars is the way to go. I would also, just push back a little bit on, the idea that we should be, primarily focused on our tourism economy. I'm not naive. I mean,
Lily,
that is certainly.
I'm back working from home and here to help. Hey, Lily, I'm hearing.
I don't know what that was, but anyways, so
Zachariah, can we just earmark?
I think that what we were talking about earlier in terms of enabling people to either create or acquire non-tourism jobs is an equally, if not greater, of importance to me, because the tourism industry locally, nationally, internationally is just, it's so far beyond our control, how much of a hit it's taking.
Zachariah, can we just say for the grant, can we earmark some money for tourism infrastructure? And that may be in retention of jobs, advertising campaign, or whatever, but just earmark it so that you can move forward with the grant. And we take 15 or 20,000 and do that. And we can decide what the best way to spend that is, maybe in subsequent meetings, but at least we can get things going and call it something that's sufficiently sexy that the state will go, oh, that looks like a good thing to do. And yeah, tourism's a big deal. And they're going to try to make sure that we get as much bang for the buck of what we can get from tourism.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think so. Here I've called it tourism infrastructure and advertising. What I'll do is put this up towards the top.
How about tourism infrastructure and job development? Because advertising could be part of the job development and part of the infrastructure, unless you need to be that specific. If you do, then that's fine.
Just include all of them.
Yeah. I just, I'm trying to get the money and then make it a little fungible.
Yeah. I think this is good. I feel comfortable with that as well. John, you you've been a proponent of funding, pilot projects, diversification, business creation efforts. What do you envision for that? That's sort of different than like a pitch event? Or how do you see that playing out?
I have no idea. I think getting people together of like-minded investors with people that have ideas is good. I don't know how it's put together. When I look at like the game, I thought that was a great networking thing, but for me personally, it like provided no value outside of just having a good time at 98 Center. So I honestly, I don't know how you go about doing it, but I know that there's a lot of people in our community that have investment dollars that want to invest in local businesses that need to get put with people that have the ideas and help mentor them along.
So I think part of that is what the Small Business Development Center does. Beth was always connecting people who had ideas for new businesses with funding and people who have, if we can have that kind of connection. So there are some resources available with that. I just wanted to share with the group too that I'm actually meeting with Mike Glauser from the Huntsman School of Business Entrepreneurship Center to talk about these certificates and things like that. So I will, I had already emailed him after our last meeting to see what kinds of resources they could help us with. And so I will inquire and maybe I'll touch base with John before I talk to him again tomorrow or something like that, just to see and Chic, what kinds of things you might be looking at and to ask specific questions of him when I talk to him tomorrow.
Leanne, I've known Mike Glauser for many, many years.
Yeah.
And through a number of deals. So make sure you say hi to him and tell him that I'm on the committee.
I also wanted to push back a little bit, Rob, on taking out childcare. I'm not entirely certain why you suggested that. Your explanation was that we didn't have enough money. The reason I'm pushing back is because time and time again, for years, that has been identified as one of the greatest needs in our community. And, it's one thing for us to try to fill abstract needs in our community. It's another to directly respond to documented and significant needs in our community that have real implications, not just for job creation, but for people who could otherwise be in the labor force but can't because there isn't any childcare. So, I personally feel like that has to remain a priority for this group because it's so critical for our labor force.
I've got a hard stop here, but I'll just respond to that. Then I'm going to bail out, unfortunately. I think it's a critical thing. I wonder if the money that we have allocated is enough to cover that.
Yeah.
That's my worry. Is
that may be the case, and I appreciate that if that's the reason why, but I don't want to take it out without having a higher level of confidence that is the case.
I think maybe on the list a little bit would send a message also to the folks that that's really important to us, even if it's, just a small amount of money, but to keep that on the list. But I don't think we can solve it with this amount of money.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know though. Why wouldn't $15,000 or $20,000 be enough to license, let's say, one or maybe two more facilities?
You could, but the problem I think is, I think that's enough, especially because there's some other resources. That's enough to get some started. It's filling the positions, the caregiver positions, when the wage isn't there. It's not a huge money maker for whoever owns the thing, but it's also really not a livable wage. And so you end up with a real difficulty trying to fill the positions. That's my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You think it's hard to fill, the tourism the, you know, service industry kinds of jobs, those jobs are even lower paying typically, and they're challenging and they're incredibly essential, but they're not compensated super well.
So I mean, I know this is a
There's
little
a
bit
bigger
off
issue
topic,
there
and I
that
want to
we
come
gotta
back to it
sort
though,
out.
like, and that's what this group is in, part been called to do, is not just submit a grant application, but to address these like bigger systemic issues. And we have got to get that one taken care of. I mean, other communities that are gateway and resort communities have childcare taxes that they then use to directly subsidize childcare in a community. I'm okay if we really feel like we can't put some money towards it because it would be a waste. But I really want this group to come back to the issue.
I mean,
Zachary,
yeah, Zachariah, I mentioned that I'm just thinking realistically that our budget is 13% of what
Sure.
it could have been. You know, it's
Sure.
100,000 versus 800,000. I mean, truthfully, I think I would rather, if you think there's something we can do in childcare, I think I'd rather do that than tourism. I just don't think that we can really make a difference in tourism with a small amount of money relative to the budget. So like, I'm for it. If you think of something, we can include that. I'm just sort of, I guess, disappointed. And I think we need to probably calibrate our expectations for what we can actually accomplish with
Yeah.
the amount of money.
we need to use our money to leverage other resources because it isn't enough money. We got to figure out in everything we do, how do you turn
Yeah.
$100,000 into $1 million?
Well,
And
yeah.
we need to leverage that. And can we, in the childcare case, in the tourism case, can our money be used to leverage somehow so that we can do, Zachariah, what you're saying about childcare taxes?
Yeah.
Okay.
All these
How do you put
things
that
have the
together? How do you make
leverage.
that work?
All these things sound like leveragey. Every single thing
Yeah.
on this list sounds
Mhm.
leveragey right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's not, I don't
that's
think
what we have to do.
Yeah,
You
no,
just
we all
can't
know
give it
that.
to the end user.
Yeah, but we know that.
Yeah.
Have we heard anything from Caitlin for a while?
No, I've mostly just been listening. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what's been talked about. I definitely agree with the childcare thing. I think for that, I'm not thinking as much about the amount of money we have allocated as much as what logistically you'll write in the grant. I think that, it's a really great idea, but it's, we haven't talked to any childcare partners in our community about this. And I think that this group has a lot more to do before we can actually start asking for money. I think that meeting with the school district or other childcare provider agencies is a first before we really start writing money. Going back to some of the stuff we talked about with COVID and with tourism, I first had a question for Zachariah with the grants that you guys gave out for COVID. How many what was the kind of breakdown for how many of those were tourism versus non-tourism businesses? Because I'm thinking about, putting money towards tourism versus COVID relief. And I think that doing creating some kind of revolving loan fund or a grant program or continuing that kind of stuff will, service a lot of this stuff that we're talking about in this BS, and it'll open it up and make it less of a burden on the county to decide who gets more benefit, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I need to pull that up. I'll come back to that. So while others continue the conversation, I'll come back to that. I just need to find the report.
I think from my recollection and having been to the business summits in the past, that that could sort of spill into a lot of the other things we're talking about. It's training and helping with the small businesses and connecting the small business developments. So I think that seems kind of, to me, maybe a no-brainer from our conversation. So maybe is that something we want to make sure happens? How much does that cost? if we're doing it remotely, so there's no food.
I mean, I think that's a
Yeah.
really, if we're talking about doing it remotely, that's the food and the venue is a substantial part of that, and also like the swag and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And this is the source of funding, right? That historically was used to run that. So I think that that should stay on. I think that that was really beneficial, and we can tailor it to these needs, and finding out from the businesses what training they want, and what speaker who they want to hear from, what topics they want.
So, I had just sort of written off the business summit for 2021. And that's perhaps part of my, stemming from my bias that, an online summit is just, unlikely to result in the same outcomes. But I do think that it's got potential, and the more that I've got, the more that I'm hearing others talk about it and how much value they derived from it, and how much potential they think it held, maybe it does make sense to put $10,000 towards it. In the past we've spent closer to 20,000. I think we have a balance left over from previous summits that we could put some money towards it. So yeah, I think we probably have $10,000 that we could put towards it as a balance, carried over from previous years. And so adding, another 5,000 to it, we could probably put on a really stellar online event. I don't know how Elaine feels about that. She'd be playing a lead role in organizing it as well.
I just feel, aside from the networking that happens there, I mean, right? But they're all presentations. And so if you have a series of presentations, they can even be pre-recorded and just put them up, and they'll all be available on a certain day and you can watch them, or,
I'm in
Yeah,
favor.
so, I mean,
I'm
in this-
favor of it.
Yeah. And I guess in my mind, I was thinking less like a one-day summit and more like a series, like a training series. Either way, it makes sense to put some money towards it. I've got 6,000 here for that kind of stuff. If the group wants to put more, then that would be fine too. If you want to make this like $15,000 and we bump up the education pot to 35,000, I'd have to reduce the amount of money for business retention and entrepreneurship. But
well, if you feel like you have enough to do a, some kind of a remote series or something, then let's use this money for other stuff.
I think we don't necessarily have to generate our own content for
No.
the training.
No.
And we can piggyback off of other people, use our money for local promotion and to get people together and get them to attend and learn what they need to do, as opposed to putting on generating new content. I think the business summit takes on a new look of, this is where we get input from the business community. This is where the economic development tells the business community what they've done, what they've accomplished, where they think they ought to go. What do they think about where we're going? Have we made any progress? You can wrap a lot of things in that business summit, should you want to do that, and really make it the report card, and as well as have education and training in it. I mean, there's lots of things you can do. It'd be a little different than past years, but if you make it real proactive that way, businesses will want to know what's in the future, what's in store, what are we going to do.
Okay. So let's just let's maybe say 5,000. 5,000. How do folks feel about these changes? I guess this is 66,000. How does that look to folks? And what if we said,
Zachariah, how about putting some money for the COVID relief recovery? I like the idea of the grants you did and extending those, or maybe modifying them somewhat so it's more competitive if you want, if there's less of a pool. But I think it's a good way to show the businesses that we care about them and we know how to do it. It'll work. It'll make an impact. And, you know, keeping a business afloat or just giving them a little bit of confidence, or it's a decent way to spread the love.
How much money was given out?
about 50,000, 52,000, something like that. And I haven't pulled up that report. I'll just pull it up and send it out to folks.
Zachariah, just a question. Since Emily's motion last week was
Right,
specifically had the numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to redo that.
Yeah. I mean, it was that wasn't a hard vote, but yeah, I'll put them back in here.
So could it be changed with just a vote to update the spreadsheet to reflect the new numbers at some point?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I was just curious because
Yeah.
it's a public meeting.
Yeah. Well, for now, I guess I probably should put them back to what they were, and we'll have to, yeah.
Yeah, why don't you just reduce the scholarships then?
We can do that for now. These numbers can be changed mid-year, I think, as long as we report to GOED. This is really just to get to a place where we have a recommendation to the county council prior to submitting the application. So I'll put these in here now and put a note that we may want to increase this fund.
And Zachariah, I mean, it sounds like, you would rather spread it around to more things and kind of like start the ball in different areas that we have identified as issues, like say childcare, for instance. Kelly, I think maybe started off saying something like, let's focus and let's make a bigger impact and maybe reduce what we do. But that's debatable, right? I mean, because there's not much money anyways. So maybe it makes more sense to show that we're doing something in these areas, identify and illustrate that to the state and the city, the county, that more needs to be done there. So I'd be in favor of spreading it around and putting $5,000 to $10,000 into, 5 to 10 categories instead of just putting.
Yeah, I don't know that I feel like we need to do that. I mean, I'm kind of at the point right now where I'm like, well, what if we just said, let's put, $20,000 towards tourism, or $15,000 towards tourism infrastructure, job development, and/or advertising, 20,000 towards COVID-19 relief and recovery, and 35,000 towards new business development, seed money, or some split like that. I don't know.
I think if we do that, it would be really helpful to have some kind of measurable outcome that, I mean, maybe that gets added later, but I really have seen this happen a lot, that the money gets spread out and there's nothing that we could really point to in a future grant application or a report to the council or, GOED audit or whatever that really got accomplished. And so I think that's an important component, at least for later, especially if we spread it around a lot.
Mm-hmm. But that's true for all of these pots.
Right. As long as it's a little fungible within the groups.
But I mean, in terms of the reporting, like, you know, it would be very easy to see $20,000, you know, put towards, you know, scholarships, right? And we can say, yeah, we gave out $20,000 to 10 people with scholarships, but what did that get us? Or we spent $20,000 on, you know, social media campaign to get people to come to Moab from our drive-to markets, but you know, click rates aren't sufficient for proving like an actual return on investment.
Right. And maybe that's part of what happens halfway through when there's a recalibrating of where the money is. Yep, we thought we were going to spend $20,000 on scholarships. It turns out we only spent $5,000. So
Sure.
we're recalibrating so that we can actually show, you know, a bigger bang for the buck. But I think it's important to keep it front of mind as we're going through.
Well, looks like, you know, we still have a lot. I mean, does anyone want to throw out some additional numbers for this BRE and entrepreneurship category? We've talked a lot about it, but the only numbers we have in here are just some figures that were thrown out for the tourism infrastructure, job development, and our advertising.
You're not going to like this. I think you can stick a good, like, I think we talked like $20,000 in the COVID recovery, but I think that the innovation, the game network, and the pitch event, to be perfectly honest with you, you could do that and have big bang for your buck for $5,000, no more than that. Okay, there's just a way to leverage your resources. And so you put in 35. Now you may want to take 30 of it and then put it with, if you want to do a loan program, rather than doing your own loan program, which is a real nightmare, you partner with the Utah Microenterprise Loan Fund and help do loans together. You partner maybe with the Community Foundation of Utah for specific loans that need to be done in this market that they would like to do. Those two are much more attuned to small business, not to scale businesses, technology businesses that scale. And I think that there's ways to, you know, to do that. So if you dropped in for existing business and new business, $35,000 put in, what would you have left over? 20,000 for COVID and 15 to 20 for tourism. There's 3 buckets.
Here's another thought, not to get us, I mean, I think this has merit and it could go into the I mean, personally, I think the administration pot could go up. I don't know what, you know, the funding looks like for Elaine's position in terms of split between transit room tax money and general fund money that will be somewhat, you know, related to the broader economic development and diversification efforts. But, you know, somebody talked earlier about Elaine going to, you know, 3 or 4 companies on the Wasatch Front and coming back with demand for jobs. Well, that costs money for Elaine to go to the Wasatch Front and spend, you know, a week doing that, and then to come back and coordinate all of that. I mean, I could easily say, hey, you know, screw all these other categories and let's put $100,000 towards funding a full-time position, because at the end of the day, somebody who is like providing direct support to businesses is probably the biggest bang for the buck in our community, hands down. Knowing, you know, from my experience, somebody that is working full-time on supporting businesses and going out and beating the bush is the biggest return on investment.
I tend to agree with that. I think we said in the very beginning, and I think we continue to say, that those connections, networking, and the coordinating of all of the, you know, trying to leverage all these resources is key. And I know, I mean, I would be much more in line with something like that, Zachary. Not that these other categories are not important, but there may be other funding for them but we're not going to be able to get to that other funding unless there's adequate administrative time to make it work.
Right.
Right. So
And I
like
don't know
what
where the balance is. I'm not sure that 100 grand is going to fly for administration, but I think
no, but what about this? Like what
more
if,
substantial amount than $4,000
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
so, I mean, we were talking earlier about like tourism marketing and advertising, but Elaine, you and I have talked a lot about, tourism being the front door to, business attraction.
Yeah,
I would really like us to see, or I would really like to see a very focused effort on like, an advertising campaign that is targeted towards remote working professionals or, small business owners that would relocate to Moab, or, targeted efforts that are, on the Wasatch Front that could pull a small unit to Moab. I mean,
well,
I
we're gonna
and
have
that takes cost.
I agree. What I see or what I envision is creating an actual marketing, like a prospectus that we could put together that is electronic and printed, that we would be able to entice businesses to think about remote workers. Now that we're going to have housing, affordable housing available, and I don't know all the details on that, but I feel that the preparation of having a very, when I would pitch a new product or something new coming into a new company and meeting with the president or the CEO, we had a wonderful presentation to help them to understand, or it could be a fam tour where you're bringing a couple of the executives down here to actually show them what we have and what it's like to be here. So I think it's marketing to those companies and corporations where we would have an opportunity to help them be inspired to say, yes, we need to put a remote workforce down there. We need to, whatever it is that they can do. So the preparation for all of that is going to take time and money.
Elaine, I think that's right on, that we need to have a portfolio, but I think it could also be used for, here's what the community has to offer if you own an existing business here and wish to diversify or retool. And I think an important component of that is what the workforce looks like and how quickly and how efficiently we can train up the workforce to the skills required by that company. And I think that's where Leanna and I come in terms of helping to create that component of it, so that as you're taking it out, or whoever is taking it out, there's that component is covered. Because as people have said, can't find good help kind of thing. But I think we can address that. And I think it's important to help people who already live here move up in their career possibilities.
Yeah.
And I would like to add, as I'm thinking about this, all the other things that are going on in the world, if we could just articulate a social justice component to this position, like that part of what we're doing is creating new business to grow our own, and take care of our own people. And I
like that terminology, Leanna. I think that's important stuff.
I really like where Kelly and Zachariah are headed. With respect to what I guess not Elaine, who just said that last visit? Was that you, Caitlin? Or Leanne? I think the vision and the narrative that Zachariah and team are going to put together for this grant is one of self-determination, that, Moab's going to pick itself up by its bootstraps and move forward. We care about our people. We want things to happen. And I think that plays into what you're saying. I don't know if the term social justice is going to work well at all up north, okay? I don't think it will. But the idea of picking yourself up by your own bootstraps, putting our best foot forward, building our people, okay, to build our economy is great rhetoric, and should not only help drive what we do, which is what we're looking at doing, obviously. It sounds great. You know, we're taking a very proactive stance here. We're not going, help me, you know, can I have another piece of bread, please?
I think you're right about the terminology, Brad. It really appeals to me, but it probably doesn't appeal to lots of our legislators.
And we don't need to worry too much about that because this isn't a competitive.
Exactly. No, I understand that, but you don't want to ever get.
But for future, I
Yeah.
think there's a tone to be set that may be more attractive down the road. And I think
Yep.
social justice probably is not the key component of that tone, but what Brad's talking
But
about
I think what
is social
Leanne was trying to
justice.
say and articulate is, okay?
Caitlin's been wanting to say something.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
Go ahead.
I think that's a really great point, and I do agree about the verbiage. I think that an easier way to, describe that well and also show it in this grant application is to, in the BRE section, have a specific pot of money for minority-owned businesses, or something like that. I think, social justice is really important, and I think that childcare is also an important element of that. But supporting minority-owned businesses would be a really easy way to do that.
And also
if
maybe
we-
even too, if
yeah.
people are showing that they're, what they're doing to help grow their employees' skill bases, or, to help their employees.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could add that to the scholarships too,
Mhm.
Leanna.
Yeah, and so there might even be businesses, we have sort of a plan to go out and visit businesses before COVID hit and talk to them about having there's a term for it, but like if they go and they get a particular degree or certificate, then they can be bumped up in pay.
Okay, so
That's what it is.
Watching it, I have a minor suggestion for the administrative costs, which is the Bear grant in the past has only supported up to 10% for admin costs. So I would just ask GOED what the max amount they would allocate.
they don't
for
have one
that.
for this. There
Okay,
isn't
well.
one for this. Yeah. So, right now we've got the money allocated. There's just 15,000 left in this pot. So, we could put it here as sort of a rough breakdown of this 70,000. It's fungible across all of these pots. But how does this look to folks?
I like it. If there needs to be anything that does make sense, if it's to boost the administration, then you're going to have to move some things around. But
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think GOED's going to look at it and say, they're not really asking anything for admin. They're going to take care of that themselves. They just want this money for programmatic use.
Yeah,
And of
which
course,
is
you'll get some admin out of the programmatic use, but to me, that means we're matching and we look good.
I agree
But
with that.
I don't want it to get cut short so we can't get anything done.
Right. My question is it gonna be matchable, or is Elaine gonna have 2 full-time jobs?
Yeah.
And the money allocated elsewhere is, it's great, but if there's not time to make it happen.
You guys need to do that. Zachariah's been around enough, and Kelly, Caitlin, and Leanne to figure that out. I mean, I agree with you. I do not want to say, okay, so now who pays Elaine? Okay. We didn't consider that, right? And so she can't do any of this stuff. And
Well, so how about, I mean, it's 1:30 now. My recommendation is that we push pause. Elaine and I are meeting on Monday, I
Okay.
believe, maybe Tuesday. To
Work
talk
it
about
out.
economic development. So we'll talk in advance of our next meeting and hopefully
Great.
have some draft language as well.
Super.
Okay.
Zachariah, I
Um,
won't be here next week. I'm taking a week off, so not
Good
that
for
you
you.
need my input, but, well, I'm not
Okay.
going anywhere, but I'm taking a week off.
Staycation. All right. Well, thank you all for your time today. And I think we made some progress, still a few loose ends, but we'll get there.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
No,
Okay.
we've gone through our agenda.
Bye.
Thanks.